St. John Paul II, on his visit to Egypt, now many years ago, went to Mount Sinai, the place where Moses encountered God and received the Ten Commandments that we heard about today in our first reading. The Ten Commandments are meant to be for us an encounter between God and ourselves, the Holy Father said at that time. The Ten Commandments are not the imposition of a tyrannical God upon us. They were inscribed in stone, but not before they were written in the hearts of men and women as a universal law valid for every time and place. Yes, the Ten Commandments form the basis not only of a moral law, but also of a way of life. Unfortunately, today, the Ten Commandments in our society, once we believed there was the Judeo-Christian ethnic, where we founded our ethics on the Ten Commandments. But in many states where the Ten Commandments were in courthouses, they've been removed because there is a separation of church and state, not recognizing that there is no separation between religion and society. Unfortunately, we don't see the Ten Commandments today as part and parcel of how laws should be made. We have a myriad of laws trying to direct the work and the morals of men and women, and yet they don't seem to achieve their purpose, because who knows all those laws? The Ten Commandments really bring it together. The first three are regarding our relationship to God, and the next seven are our relationship with one another. They encompass truly a path through life that brings us to eternal life, because they are written first in the hearts of men. When I was a younger boy, and my brother was a year younger than me, he always said, the fourth is the hardest commandment to keep. Why? Honor your father and mother. He didn't always like to obey. I wonder, what's the hardest commandment for you to keep? What gives you that difficulty, either in your relationship to God or with other people? We have to zone in and see where our difficulty is so that we can eliminate it, especially during this time of Lent. Our relationship with God and with one another needs to be strengthened. This is what our Lenten journey is all about. How important it is for us today to recognize that the Ten Commandments are not just a set of rules, but rather a plan of life, which is so important. In the gospel today, Jesus reinforces one of the commandments, the worship of God. We see a rare moment in the life of Jesus when he seems to be angry. It's not that meek Jesus, not that Jesus who was healing people, but rather a Jesus who becomes angry because the temple is being not a place of worship, but rather a place of commerce. We must understand that, yes, there was the sacrifice of animals, which was part of the temple worship. But in order to buy those animals, the money changers were there because it had to be bought with Jewish money. And Roman money was what was in circulation, and so they had to change it to Jewish money. It was a necessary step for that worship. And yet Jesus recognized that this was not the way to do things. And he drives from the temple everyone, even the animals. Yes, telling us that the new worship of God will not depend on the sacrifice of animals, but rather predicting, as he said, it would be the sacrifice of himself, the only Son of God, for our salvation. It is a preparation to understand Easter, because he says, destroy this temple in 3 days, I will raise it up again. And he spoke about the temple of his body. In our second reading today, we hear St. Paul writing to the Corinthians, reminding them that the message we preach as Christians is bound to be misunderstood. We proclaim Christ crucified, and only when Jesus did the will of his Father did he, in obedience, find the freedom to accomplish the mission of his life. In these days, we see Pope Francis in Iraq, an historic trip where he goes to reinforce the Christian message of solidarity and forgiveness in a land that needs it so much. The Ten Commandments, in a certain sense, are missing something. They say nothing of forgiveness. Yes, our relationships to others are rather stratified in those particular ways. But Francis, with great courage, speaks to a people who are so downtrodden, especially when he spoke in the church in Baghdad where 48 people were slain, martyred by ISIS 10 years ago. And the people call, please canonize these martyrs. And they are martyrs, and someday I know they will be canonized. But his message was rather, we must forgive those who have done this. How hard a message is it in our Christian life to see that other piece of the message that Jesus brings us, not in the Ten Commandments, but the commandment of Jesus himself as he teaches us it in the Our Father. How important for our lives today to recognize the law of God that gives us that understanding of our relationship to God and one another, but also that point of forgiveness that is so important in our world today. Today, as we celebrate this Eucharist on this Lenten journey of ours, we are reminded that we do not travel alone. The Lord is our constant companion on the way, and he was as he was with the disciples on the road to Emmaus after his resurrection. But they did not recognize him. And sometimes we do not recognize that the Lord is accompanying us also, especially in those difficult moments when we try to live up to the promises we made at the beginning of Lent. Promises of prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. Yes, we can always begin again. We can always make those promises and try to keep them. We cannot fail to recognize that Jesus is walking with us. And in the people we encounter along this journey, we find the Lord himself. There's always a lesson for us, and the Lord will open our eyes to that message, just as we see today in the world around us the need for forgiveness and following the commandments of God. If we ourselves are not committed to that regime of life, how can we expect the world to embrace it? And so we rededicate ourselves to what we know, God's law, and especially Jesus as he applies it in the most difficult of circumstances as we see them around us today.